3, 2, 1. Call this meeting to order. We'll take a moment for silent prayer and or reflection. Terry, if you call the roll, please.
I'm sorry. It was a long day. Is it recording?
It's gone.
Oh, good. I thought I just sat it down there and forgot.
Let's start it without it.
Thank you. Pat Rooney?
Here.
Kathy Cox? Here. Nicole Cohen? Here. John Maston?
Here. Please stand and join me in the pledge. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'll take a motion to review and accept the agenda.
I make a motion we review and accept the agenda.
Second.
Terry?
Pat Rooney?
Yes.
Kathy Cox?
Yes.
Nicole Cohen?
Yes.
John Maston?
Yes. Item number 3 on our agenda is to review, discuss, and possible action on the superintendent's evaluation. We had started talking about this at a prior meeting, and here we are again with it before us. I think time is of the essence on this because we're operating in the year now that the review will reflect on, and we do want to produce what our expectations are, I think, in relatively short order. So we've gotten several different copies of evaluation tools, and one from the superintendent herself. I looked at hers, and I tell you, I have a preference. And that is what the superintendent sent over. I think it's got a 5-point rating system on it, which is what we're after. When we go to page 3 on that, and we look at knowledge, skills, and dispositions, I think that's a really good starting framework. And then from there, we can talk about what goes under each one, I think a little bit more in depth, but I think that's a really good place to start.
And you like the rating system?
I do like the rating system. I think when we look at our old one from policy CBI, 1, 2, 3, we don't grade students like that. Again, I like to look at what I would really, really love, and I would like to look at what I really, really hate, and hopefully somewhere in between there is something I'm going to be okay with. I like percentages a lot better than a matrix, but I think in the interest of how this is done nationally, with all sorts of board employed people and personnel reviews, I think the matrix works quite well. And I think that if we
talking about? I'm so sorry.
we're talking about the document that Diana sent over.
Okay, I have that, and I see the standards. Is that what you're talking about? 'Cause
On page 3.
I may have sent you the wrong one.
I don't have anything on page 3 but a picture.
This is the page 3 that, did you not receive this from me? It's down below under knowledge. There's each of the categories.
Like the bullets?
And then that's got the bullets.
Okay.
No, I may have attached the wrong thing. I apologize.
I thought I just saw
No
it.
wonder you were looking at me like I was crazy when I talked about the 5 categories.
Well, I've got the 5 categories.
Well, I see the
They're on
categories.
front.
No, actually,
Oh.
I apologize. This was, I attached the wrong document. That was the article that I read
Okay.
that had the knowledge, dispositions, et cetera.
Mhm.
Copies of. Yeah, this is what I thought I had attached, but I have electronically. My suggestion, I apologize again, was to actually take the information from this as well as the various samples that you will have, and create categories that would be vision and strategic focus, education, fiscal personnel management, personal professional leadership, and then governing board.
Could you say that one more time?
Yeah, I'm going to go print a clean copy because I have written on this one if you want to give me a moment. And then my thought was that under those categories, various skills, knowledge, and dispositions could be identified, and then also some of the statements that are in other, that would fit under those categories would make it cleaner.
Okay, because skills, knowledge, and disposition, actually, they have some.
Exactly, there's a lot of stuff there.
Right.
And so let me go, I had actually toned those down a little bit on the list.
That makes more sense.
Yes, thank you, I apologize. I'm going to go print that for you all.
All the information.
And then I passed out the questions that I'd given to you when you came, just because I thought maybe some of those, it would be good for the board to see that.
Absolutely.
That some of those maybe, some of those more specific to our.
And I think that would be good for everybody to review, because I'm not sure everybody has seen those.
Okay.
Yeah. Maybe while she's gone, we can be talking about them right now. That's what he said. Any in particular, Nicole, that you particularly were interested in putting on your list?
I hadn't given that a whole lot of thought. It was actually, let's see, what are I wish I had the categories, because that would make more sense to me to start looking at things.
Aren't the categories right there, business services?
No, my categories are there. I meant the ones she read off, but she's making a copy. So I just thought that maybe, because we don't have answers to all these questions yet. We have a good majority of them, but I will tell you that there are tons of things within these 100 questions that are critical for every board member to stay on top of going forward in the future, every superintendent to stay on top of. So I thought we might want to pull some of those just as more specific instead of a generic measurement, if you will. But I'm sure I can come up with a couple that I think are important.
Well, you got what?
Just 100.
37 under business services.
Yeah.
So which ones would those be?
I think this encompasses several different areas. Different departments.
Oh, sure.
But I think the number one thing that we're looking at in here is some level of supervisory role and information gathering against the department.
Like the list of software and annual licensing fees, that's a big deal. And that's only going to get exponentially more expensive and more cumbersome and more, so something like that would,
Where's that?
number 96. And that's just an example of what I had in mind, because a lot of these are definitely more specific.
Well, you get into the licensing fee, and that actually hits two of the departments. That's going to be business services, and it's also going to be personnel and technology.
Right.
And so probably I would want to hear from 2 out of 3 people that would be touching that at a supervisor or higher level, if I were the superintendent.
Sure, absolutely. Do we have that matrix or no?
I sent it to the back copier, so
sorry.
Terry's getting it. So it explains why you guys didn't understand. I started it out with that I had excerpted from the chapter of the book, which I ended up sending you the chapter of the book. My apologies.
Was it good?
I actually liked it.
It was interesting, when I was contemplating if I thought I could be a superintendent, I was reading some of these, and so this was from this book, Superintendent Leadership, so that's where it came from. But the idea was to identify some specific categories and then also look at some of those indicators under knowledge, skills, and dispositions. And so
The only problem that I have with taking something from the national level is, you know, when I read in here, it's Chief State School Officers organization that has put this together, so.
And I wasn't, when you see what I have, I wasn't looking at taking the standards.
Sure.
I was really looking at saying, if we're talking about the categories, they address what these standards have identified, simply.
And I don't want it to be taken as, because it said CCSSO, it could have said ASBA, it could have said any of the organizations that.
Alphabet soup.
Exactly. They have a purpose. They want to measure things in a much different way than I want to measure it, or that the constituents that I talk to all the time want to measure it. So I can understand that some of these would be very important, but some of them may not be if we're making a local decision, that's all.
And I'm not suggesting taking any language from the standards at all, just simply if we were looking at that being kind of my thought beyond my tenure as a superintendent. People
Sure.
coming in will have a sense of these are the big categories.
Right.
So.
Thank you.
So what's on page 3 of the article? Knowledge, skills, and dispositions.
So we were following along. It seemed to make sense.
It made sense, no wonder.
So what if we start on the last page of the handout you gave us, and
But if you
Start
don't
with the
like those categories, that's fine. It just
Oh,
seems
those are
to
the
take all of
maybe
the
we should start
attachments
with
and
the
kind of.
categories and agree there, and then it's easy to fit things under them. That's my suggestion, John.
I actually like all the categories.
I do too.
Okay.
Do we have a consensus then that those will be our categories?
Fine with me?
I'm sorry, John, what did you say?
Do we have a consensus that those will be our categories?
I consent.
And you're talking about knowledge, skills, and dispositions, right?
No, these are the categories
Oh,
right here.
okay.
Vision and so forth. Are you okay with those?
Yeah, I do have a question though, rather than, you know, as I look over these other things and the things that we got from the Scottsdale School District and Crane District, what is the real problem with the current evaluation? What's the problem with that?
It didn't apply in most areas as we went through to us as a board. It's one thing when you're sitting there as a former principal of a school district reading through it.
Yeah.
It's a whole nother thing when you're a layman board member. You have no idea how to judge how she differentiates between instructional methods and what. How would a board member know that unless they were following her around?
Well, I
And
guess
knew
what
what
I'm
those-
saying is like the thing that you've given us questions submitted today, you can become very specific and you can become very bogged down.
Oh,
And what I'm saying is on the previous thing, it says it deals with community public relations. It has enough, what does it have, about 9 categories and all that? that covers a lot of stuff. And
Where,
I would hate to think that, I mean, I like to be real specific too, but at the same time, you can become so specific that your evaluation may not produce what you want it to produce. I mean, I'm looking at some of these things here that.
well, I don't want you to focus on,
No,
I'm not looking to include all that. That was
No,
just,
I know you're not.
okay.
I know
okay.
you're not. But, I mean, you could go down there and say, list of all real estate property locations in addition to our 8 schools. You go down and all those things. I don't have a problem with that. The superintendent should know that. Names of the annual auditing team from Heinrich.
Okay, but now I feel like you're mocking me
I'm
because,
not,
okay, well then
Nicole.
don't use those examples.
Okay.
My point is that while this may be too much for you, Pat, this doesn't make sense to somebody who has not grown up for 30 years in education, and that's not fair to a board member to evaluate a superintendent based on stuff they don't understand.
Okay.
That's all I'm saying.
I'm not, first of all, if I have a disagreement, I'm not mocking.
Okay,
I'm
but
just,
mock's the wrong word.
I'm just asking. So then, all of a sudden, we get to, like, I look at that Scottsdale Unified School District, and which is a good school district. They have good schools, other than the superintendent they just got rid of.
And the board
Yeah.
that they've got.
But you see what I'm saying? And then I look at Crane, and these evaluations are all very similar. I'm not disagreeing with it. If we can come up with something better, good. I just hate to go through an exercise that basically what we do is we reformat and we use different words.
Well, I think there's a big difference between the Scottsdale and ours.
I actually like Cranes to a large degree. I think that some of the base formatting that our superintendent has brought us is there.
Yeah.
I think that we can probably take some of the concerns and add some of the concerns that we as a board may have to that list in the Crane document.
And I don't think you're ever going to get a perfect one, so we can go through this and do this. But that's still, I just wanted to voice my opinion on that.
Sure. Sure.
And I didn't grow up for 30 years in education.
Not everybody has the benefit that you and Kathy have had, I guess is my point. And I think that gets lost on you and Kathy often. Because you're speaking to another person in education, and you're often speaking to the teachers in education. But the people that aren't in education, a lot of the time don't have the foggiest idea of what you're talking about. So if our evaluation in part is to judge whether or not, I just read it, how they're interacting with the community, customer focus, things like that, maybe we shouldn't be using industry language. That's all.
Yeah.
And we could better reflect the actual questions that come into our community in a common sense way instead of, that's what I meant to use these questions as a guide for, just because these were actual questions that I had gotten over a long period of time. And
Okay.
so I hope that made sense.
This idea is to rename this document, Nicole, give it a name so that we could refer to it in the evaluation with the idea in mind of the superintendent will keep up to date. I don't want to call them reports, but the information.
I didn't mean I appreciate that, but I didn't mean for this document in any way, shape, or form to be included in
Okay.
the evaluation at all. That's the layman questions that come into the board, the way they come into the board, and our evaluation of our superintendent doesn't reflect that.
Do you have a suggestion how we could meld those two together?
Well, no, I thought that we would all collaborate
I
together.
mean, I just made a suggestion. And
Sure.
It's not what you were looking for.
Well,
so I'm not
because
quite
that
sure.
wasn't, let me clarify why I don't think it should be included.
Okay.
It was not Diana's responsibility to know the answers to all the questions. It was
Right.
simply a document that I tried to get answers from the people who should have provided them, which ultimately is going to be the responsibility
Okay.
of any future superintendent. But those people would not provide it, and I felt like she needed to have a guide for what I was going to start asking her ultimately to provide. But she shouldn't have
No.
the level of detailed knowledge on
No.
some of those things.
It must
But
be a
again,
way
there-
to write it.
So we're in the weeds.
Well, I'm not trying to get into the weeds, I just thought that I could provide some insight from the community.
So, and I appreciate that, and I, you know, here's the thing, I think Nicole's got a very valid point in that the superintendent needs to have a pulse and a finger on everything in those 100
Right.
questions.
And if you're not from this district, you're not going to have that.
So I think there's some valid points in what she's bringing up. And I think the intent that she has is as we work through the document, we should be mindful that these are areas that our superintendent should be mindful of and should have a finger on the pulse of. It's not their direct job to do any of it.
Right.
And so because of that, I think it's a good reminder that the job of superintendent is a very all-encompassing supervisory role. But our task here today is, while we keep that in mind, is to formulate the matrix that we use to evaluate a superintendent. And it would be my recommendation that, again, that we look at a jumping off point, where we've got something that may be pre-formatted that we could take and adjust to our district and to language concerns and things of that nature. And so, again, my thought process, I look at the Crane document. I think that the matrix that's there very closely already fits some of what is laid out in Diana's document. And I think we would have a jumping off point there where we could simply take a little bit of time, review and make suggestions as to where and what we would add from maybe some of the other documents that we've been presented with.
Can I give some history?
Yes, please.
This document that we're using now as a tool originally was part of our policy, but our legal department asked us to remove it because as part of the actual evaluation, anything that was discussed on here could be pulled by a request for records. So the reason they've taken it out of policy is now it's a working document for you guys, and it goes in the executive session only, so.
So it's not an exhibit like it
Right.
is for other districts. Well, when you look at the Scottsdale, it has an E for exhibit.
But that makes a lot of sense. Salaries may not be confidential, but reviews of personnel should be.
So all the rest of them are exhibits. That's interesting. Ours is the only one that's not.
Could we come to consensus on using, our jumping off point will be from the Crane document? That's fine with me, but it would make it easy if we could all agree on that.
If everybody would indicate whether or not that's okay with them, use the
A
Crane
starting-
document
a
as a
starting
starting
point.
point.
I don't mind doing that. I do prefer the actual visual formatting of Scottsdale, just for reading purposes.
Understood.
Okay. feel like I'm taking another eye exam.
The letters are weird at top.
Huh.
The letters are weird at top.
The letters, the boxes. So if we're going to use the Crane document, are we going to just replace the headers with vision, strategic focus?
We're going to start with five
those five.
headers.
Okay.
And I think that there are some things on here, so you take something like education, you take A, under education on the Crane document. I think A, B, C.
Well, see, now I think we're getting into a philosophical conversation because
And D,
both of those are,
I think those are germane. Now, what do we want to add to that?
well, when you say keeps informed of modern educational practices, that's a problem for me because that changes every single month. There's new stuff out. And we could, our superintendent and staff can spend endless amounts of dollars and brain power chasing down the newest modern theory that is there to make bank on our kids. And I think that's a big waste of time. That's why I think that particular language is very progressive.
Okay.
And it starts to go down a philosophical road. I mean, keeping informed, of course. I mean, I would
Keeping
think.
informed of education practices through a professional development curriculum available to the board.
Education, keeping informed of educational practices, absolutely.
Does our old, under instructional leadership, letter D, fit a little bit better?
Actually, some of the ones that are in our original one are actually quite good. In my opinion, the way that they're worded. So some of them are too detailed for,
Because ours looks at community needs, which is lost in the other one.
I mean, I look at the Crane thing and it has education, and I look at ours and it says instructional leadership. I mean, that's what our focus, but how does she operate as an instructional leader? I mean, and then I start looking down at some of these things, and I mean, I think we expect a lot of a superintendent, and I think our language is pretty all-inclusive. Which would include things like this. I mean, if she's going to supervise all the people that are working under her administratively, they're the ones that have to know how to do all this stuff. But in the end, she's running the show. And I think that our current document, I don't see, we could add stuff to it, but I don't see that it's that lacking.
What if we just got rid of the self-evaluation and board's evaluation and put this rating scale out?
And I don't
to the
have a
side?
problem with the rating.
No, I didn't.
You know, on this thing where, 1, 2, 3, if that's an issue, I don't have a problem with changing that. Exactly. And in some of these cases, I think I've seen in some of them, they have that it's not applicable or whatever. But I don't, and if that bothers people, the 1, 2, 3 rating, I mean, let's look at something else. But let's don't throw out the baby with the bathwater.
Well, the question is, which one are we going to refer to? Is it going to be Crane or is it going to be ours? I don't care. I do like the instructional leadership on ours for the heading rather than education.
Am I the only one that remembers when we did Diana's evaluation that we all had problems with the form, and that we all agreed that the form,
That's why we're here.
okay. I'm not trying to redo or invent the wheel at all. I thought that we had all agreed that this form needed to be
Maybe.
updated. So maybe the best way to do it is just to go back through our own form.
Go back through it and see what maybe not apply.
Okay.
But, you know, and I agree, like with Kathy, on you get to this crane thing and it says education. Well, and then I start looking at some of the questions, and really they're like instructional leadership questions. So, you know, change the rating. Go down through the thing and see what questions aren't particularly good, and either come up with another question or discard it. What do you think? I hate to
You know,
put
I
you on the
actually,
spot.
I have no issue with going from our form. I will share why I didn't use instructional leadership, and part of that is because instruction and curriculum are components of educational leadership. And so even in looking at here, we talk about curricular materials, which are really different from instruction. And then we talk about our educational goals, which are, you know, different from instruction. And so to me, there was more things that could be encompassed under education. That was the reason that I suggested.
What if it were just called educational leadership?
That would be a more appropriate term, in my opinion, on that one.
Okay.
That was all.
Okay. And under that comes both
All
curriculum
of that.
and instruction?
Yes. Anything related to the education of students.
Okay.
That was the only reason I changed that.
Now, is it important that we have self-evaluation and a board's evaluation? Or if anyone,
Yes.
is that you
Yes.
like that?
I like that because what it does is it's a conversation creator. Employee evaluations are not one-sided or top-down. They're conversations between employer and employee. And when you get the conversation, we may think, well, gosh, you know, we have no knowledge of what you did here, and so we don't think you're doing a great job. And the next thing you know, there's the conversation that comes out of that because they rated it high.
Okay.
And it may be that they're doing a phenomenal job, we just haven't been briefed on it.
So what we would change is the instructions at the top with 3, 2, 1
Correct.
to this new rating.
I would like a 4, 3, 2, 1 because I think there should be an opportunity to exceed expectations.
And again, I would go OSNUX.
That's sufficient, don't you think? So we're looking here on the, use this right here.
So as opposed to having the boxes, you would just put in like the OS and URX, is that what you're saying?
Outstanding, satisfactory, needs improvement, unsatisfactory, or not observed.
Okay.
And I think that was one of the things when we were doing it, that some of it wasn't observed.
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Correct, and that gives us the ability to have a not observed rating.
Okay.
Now, the problem you're going to have is when you try to average those.
We're not going to average those.
So you're not going to average them anymore.
No. What we want is we want a matrix, and we want to have a meeting as a body with just Carrie in the room. We'll go through, we'll decide what the ratings are, and then from there, I think the procedure should be, we would bring Diana in and go over our findings. And
That's
do
what you
it,
did last time.
do it with Carrie.
Would you still leave that note on there too, that Crane has, note any rating of outstanding needs improvement or unsatisfactory required evaluator to list specific information?
Good question.
I think I like it, and I think I hate it,
Me too.
Yeah.
which means it's probably just fine.
Certainly, the unsatisfactory, what does the X mean again? Not
Not
observed, okay,
observed.
that's right. Certainly, the unsatisfactory needs an explanation.
Well,
I think I agree.
Okay. Just want to make sure.
I see the purpose.
Don't you agree?
I agree. We agree on something, Nicole.
Example, so you know
But
it's not
hang
creative or discrimination, right?
See, I'm not such a bad guy.
Thank you.
We're equal opportunity here at this board.
Yeah.
Now what?
All right, so
Well, it was.
we're going to use our existing form.
That's
I-
a good idea.
Does anybody have a problem with changing the word instructional to education?
Or educational.
Leadership.
Educational
I
leadership.
don't think it's a good idea.
Is there anything that you would like to combine on our
Right
form?
here.
As far as categories or just the?
Categories, because you've hit 5
I
overarching
think as we went
points.
through, I combined, just a couple of the supervision areas.
Okay,
They can remain separate. I just kind of thought that the board was looking for something. By looking at the examples, I thought you were looking for something that was a little bit more condensed.
I don't know that necessarily condensed is what we're after. I'm thinking that number one, the actual matrix itself
Yeah, and that's,
was the biggest issue.
so if I had sent you the right attachment, then you would have read at the beginning that says, I am not married to any of this.
Right.
So,
Well,
they were
let's-
just throwing something different out there for perspective.
I would,
What are we talking about?
our document,
I know. Oh, I
about
thought you were
anything
on.
we'd like to combine. And personally, I could see a good argument to combine 5 and 7.
Absolutely. School plant and business and finance?
It's one department
Yeah.
under us, so I think that might not be a bad idea.
Well, see what Diana thinks though, because she's the overseer, so what do you think?
Yes, I think so,
Okay.
absolutely.
So we're gonna combine these. Makes sense.
You got that, Terry?
That was an easy one, yeah.
Makes a lot of sense.
That's good.
Personnel seems super wordy.
Always is.
I didn't know if either of you had any suggestions on that. I mean, again, most of the overseen part seems like you could kind of gather all the overseen part into one almost. Responsible for the oversight of these areas.
Yeah. I would use the word overseas by itself. I would use effectively overseas. And then the list.
Hawkishly overseas.
Doesn't make sense alone in 2 minutes.
Now, the only thing, and I don't care which way it goes, the good thing about breaking down the skill sets here is that when you, as the superintendent or the administrator, and takes a look at this is always reminding you of all the components that go into that department that need to be supervised. Otherwise, it might be easy to, oh, I haven't thought about, oh, how are we doing with that? I need to think about that. So that to me is the positive part of seeing what comes out of the personnel relations. But if you want to combine it, I guess Jamie and Dana can tell us which one they think is best.
I could go either way on it as well. I think there's a valid point you made in leaving it in a more bulleted format.
Look at G. Is G already in policy, that procedure? Yes. So just as an example for G, we have a policy on that already. And so that would just come under implementation of policy as opposed to establishment of procedures. We have that already written out.
So there's some here that we could just delete.
Well,
So, or just,
That's fine.
oversees the implementation of policy for the assignment, promotion, demotion, transfer, discipline, and discharge of employees.
Because it's kind of redundant if she's also required on K to interpret for staff and implement the board policies. That is, if it's
That's
already
true.
a policy, and she's responsible for implementing it, or he or she.
And same thing with I, ensuring that staff's treated fairly without favoritism while assisting.
We've got an EEOC policy, it just needs a SOPA that I talked about.
So no more G.
I think we could take those out.
What are we eliminating?
a few of them. But now,
under-
for example, H, that one, we spend a lot of time doing, is identifying how do we effectively, and we get our looking at staffing ratios and things like that. What personnel do we need in order to effectively run this program? That's something that is
That we use.
not in policy.
Okay, so that would be good to be there.
Pat, we're talking about getting rid of G.
G and I, right?
G, I, and...
Or no? Did
and-
you say I?
I was just
I-
saying G.
And that's part of our Title IX requirement.
But K, Pat, K actually encompasses those.
Right,
Those are redundant.
but H should be there, is what I'm hearing.
Right. I'm not sure I like the wording on J.
I don't
We
either.
don't have.
We don't have
Did we
this.
agree that G and I are gone?
We have a consensus that G and I are gone.
Yes.
Kathy?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry, yes.
She isn't that.
No, J.
J speaks, I think, to the annual budget meeting. And meeting and conferring is unionistic language, and we don't have it. That's where I start to kind of run into the problem with it.
No, we're not doing
And
that.
actually, D addresses it. D is establish a procedures for the participation of staff in policy and regulation development.
Okay.
So we just get rid of it. J.
Okay. We could probably take regular and occasional out of L.
Take which one?
Regular and occasional out of L, summons employees of the district to attend such regular and occasional meetings as are necessary. And just get it to where
Such meetings.
such
If
meetings.
you summon, they will come.
I'm summoning you to the office. F actually handles Jay had as well. Oversees the establishment of procedures for the development of salary schedules for all personnel.
So you're saying get rid of F?
No, F stays.
What did it, maybe I didn't hear you. What?
F stays, but
Okay.
it's basically, it's the same thing as J. J is meet and confer, and F is
okay,
establish,
okay,
yeah.
all right.
Anything else in personnel relations?
So the ones that we have now are A through F, H,
K and L.
H, J, and L?
H, K.
And L,
H,
okay,
H,
H,
K.
K, and L, okay. Right, okay.
I'm dropping down to number 3. And I don't see anything there.
I agree.
D was one that I didn't understand.
Ensures effective participation in interactions with other public and private agencies.
For the superintendent or for staff? So,
I think both.
I don't know that you can ensure that.
What's the different verb you use there?
Well, what is
participation in
effective
interactions.
participation?
It just seems,
I mean, we have 4,000 things going on simultaneously, so who's
Strives for it.
gonna determine whether or not it's effective if he or she is communicating
We do.
with, I understand that, but what does that mean? How do they strive for it if they don't understand what the question is? I say we get rid of D. I think A covers that. If you want to add, I think you should combine A and D and get rid of ensuring effective participation.
I think we leave D and take out with other public and private agencies and say with other governmental agencies.
But what kind of participation are you talking about? This is forced participation with the public?
This is forced participation, I think, with other government agencies.
And not just like look at
Or-
the Chamber of Commerce, I mean, look at all the
Well,
other.
but that's community affairs.
Okay.
As the superintendent, not only do we want our superintendents to be actively involved, but wouldn't we want the superintendent to encourage staff to be involved in the community? I mean, it isn't just the superintendent that delivers the message.
Correct.
It seems to me that effective leadership that's what we want her doing, but at the same time, we want her encouraging the other leadership in the organization to be, and not just leadership, but others to be active and participating in community relations as far as, informing them about what the schools are getting.
So could D be encourages staff participation
Yes.
and interaction with other public and
Yes.
private agencies?
Yeah, I just think that is real important if you're going to have a dynamic institution.
I agree.
And who provides the leadership? The superintendent provides the leadership.
I just think that that's a mighty big ask to grade any one person on. Even if you encourage it, what is it exactly that you're encouraging? I mean, seriously, because there are so many different organizations, and I mean, to just have the super, so we can check the box and say, she sent out an email saying, I encourage you to participate in what? Because they're already required in their 301 paperwork and that framework to participate with the community if they want to participate in the 301. But other than that, I mean, there's so many things. Of course, just by example, she's going to encourage that interaction, but to have it as a, it seems like you're now forcing the superintendent to take on that role of ensuring, recommending, encouraging, whatever it is, participation with public and private agencies in terms of what? There's lots of agencies out there that want to participate with the school district. A lot of them have their own ideas of why they want to participate with the school district, and she just is supposed to arbitrarily say, go participate and make it effective. I don't get that. It doesn't make sense to me. Because I think it's covered in 301. And the people who don't participate in 301, clearly, we don't need to overstep into their personal life and tell them what they need to participate in their own time, because they're here doing their job that they're paid for.
I also think about that from the standpoint of our directors. So, like, we have directors and supervisors who interact with the school facilities board, or we have that interact with some of our social services, special education services folks. And so if we're talking about that,
leadership,
they participate with those public and private agencies on behalf of the district effectively. And I don't know how to determine that, and that's where, but that's kind of how I interpreted that.
well, if I just added leadership in there, it would make a lot more sense to me, because that would be a leadership role to do that, but not, I was thinking in terms of everybody.
I actually look at it in terms of everybody, because you're going to have certain people on staff that go above and beyond, and we should be encouraging that. You're going to have others that aren't, and you're going to have others where we have an expectation. And so I look at encouraging, if I'm going to use that, encourage staff to participation and interaction with other public and private agencies. I think the email example is a valid one, but I also look at the leadership component to that, where it's more of a requirement and an expectation that person is going to be doing that. And then I also look at the other, you get staff members, and I'll pick on Ginger Balboni because she does Key Club. Ginger is out and doing things with other organizations all the time. And so I think we want to be encouraging that. I think that helps her as an individual to grow and move beyond. I think that's part of leadership, is to make sure that the person you put at the helm is encouraging the best in others. You can't force the best out of others, but you sure as heck can encourage them.
Okay, well, encourage is one thing. This, we were talking ensures effective participation, and
I've already.
that's fine. You want to check the box, encourages, encourage away, but I don't know that there's I mean, we've got a lot of people that cover a lot of clubs that get a lot of stipends. I mean, seriously, our teachers are like, and staff are up to their eyeballs in community participation. The box is checked, in my mind.
Which means we're doing a good job with that.
I just want to clarify, I don't believe that any people who run clubs get stipends.
Well, Ginger does not. Those clubs, those service
No
clubs.
clubs get stipends, just for clarification.
Right.
Since we're being filmed, I just want to say.
Sorry.
No, that's, I knew you'd want it clarified, so I
Sure.
just wanted to do that.
They don't receive stipends, you're right. But they do receive payment for participating via their 301, correct? It
They,
qualifies to satisfy
Yes.
the required participation in order to get the 6,000, 7,000, whatever, 301, okay. So I didn't.
It's
mean to
an
say-
area.
Right.
I see what you mean. Okay.
All right, so we've got number 3 covered then? Anything on 4?
Well, I think that we, at a minimum, need to tighten up 4A and define what that means, because a lot of stuff happens in our school day. There's been a lot of comments made over the past year and a half. I'm not going to go into any detail on that, but let's just say I don't feel like the superintendent needs to notify the board on the day-to-day running. Now, if there's an emergency situation, absolutely. If somebody has been injured, absolutely. But if they're managing it and handling it, and we happen to hear about it, I don't think we hold it against any future superintendent because they haven't picked up the phone or sat down to write us an email because something happened that the board was unaware of. We're not supposed to micromanage the day-to-day operation. So I just feel like that should be clarified with some other language.
You know, I mean, as a board member, you know, it would be the significant things that
Right.
might happen, like if you all of a sudden have to have a school closure, stuff like that.
Right.
It's not these little, in fact, actually, the superintendent would be suspect to me if they were calling you on stuff that wasn't, you know, that you didn't need to know about. And, but I think that's a good thing to have in there because, to me, that's one of the responsibilities of the superintendent, is to informed on issues, needs, and operation of the school system.
Okay, but issues is very wide, so maybe emergency issues.
I think, I see what you're saying, because you don't want the minutia, but you want to know, have a general pulse of what's going on. Like the other day when the kid went through the cones and got struck by a car at the high school. I don't want to put the word emergency on issues, but major issues.
I go back to when I was getting my administrative certificate, and I remember reading that a principal or administrator could never do anything that would, well, I forget how it was termed, that would surprise the superintendent. I don't ever let the superintendent be stunned, let the superintendent know. Well, as the board, it's that category of things that, and it is embarrassing, you know, when you go out in the community and it's pretty big and you didn't know about, I'm sorry, I didn't know about that, and then you're just kind of left hanging. So it is what the surprise or shock is. Those, you use the word emergencies, but it's probably a little bigger than, a little larger than that.
I actually, when I get that, and it does happen where you get a left field, well, I wasn't informed on that, but I'm very sure knowing our superintendent in our district that it's well under control.
Absolutely, and if I have a question, I can call. But I've been asked many things in the community that I was unaware of at the time that they were taking place, and in no way did I feel embarrassed. How could you possibly know everything going on?
Well, the ones I was asked for, it was embarrassing.
It's an hourglass, but it's an hourglass, and in the tight spot in the hourglass, it's the superintendent. So there's a lot of information on the top and a lot of information on the bottom, and it doesn't always cross quickly.
Right.
nor should it.
No,
We
that's
should-
my point.
We should be allowing the latitude of the process to take place. And you know, the purpose of the evaluation, the reason why we're going through the document is this is the single employee that the governing board has.
Right.
We don't employ teachers, we don't employ custodians, we don't employ parapros, we don't employ directors, we don't employ computer techs. We employ a superintendent from the board. And because we employ the superintendent from the board, we don't need to know the minutia, we just need to have trust in the person that we have doing the job.
Well, and I think there's also a certain amount of individual responsibility that if you hear something, that you simply pick up the phone and put a call into Terry.
But there's this element of judgment. I'm not talking about Diana, I'm talking about the next superintendent. And let's say the next superintendent is that just doesn't have good judgment about what the board should know, and this item is missing. So then, how are you going to handle that? It wasn't on the evaluation. I mean, it's kind of a catch-all, kind of an item.
Well,
I think,
Can I give you a small wording change that may help?
well, I'd like to hear from Diana.
Okay,
She
go
just
ahead.
said
well,
something.
and maybe
I'm
even
sorry.
John's, I think significant helps. That part of the issue that we will face continually, though, and it was brought up, is that there are situations where you will hear about it before I even know about it.
That's right.
And so we've had a couple of those because of social media that.
And it doesn't mean it's not being handled,
That's true.
even though you
Right.
don't know about
That's
it.
right, and that is one of the
It's a big
things
organization.
that. Yeah.
So maybe if we made it, supplies the board with information on issues, needs, and operation of the school system. It's not putting the onus on the superintendent at that point to be continually informing someone, but they would be the pivot point, they would be the go-to, they would be the supply point for that information.
I mean, it seems like all the really significant things that happen in our district go out on Blackboard because I get a text message for all of them. So it seems like that would take care of those kind of issues for the most part, unless there was potentially a confidentiality issue with something, then of course it wouldn't.
But I think that the point of bullet A is to say that the superintendent is that waypoint between the district and the board for information. And so maybe if we made it, and I'll say again, supplies, as opposed to keeps the board informed, but they supply the information to the board. Whether we have to go get it or it comes to us naturally, it's being supplied.
You know, I mean, I like the wording right there, and I guess what I'm saying is that common sense would, I expect our superintendent to use some common sense on of informing us on stuff. And that you have that in there, that's an expectation that on things that are, whether you put significant, then all of a sudden you narrow it. This may not be what is considered significant, but you know, things that could really cause a problem. I expect that the superintendent would do that, and I haven't had a complaint at all since Diana's been here about that, because I think we have been informed. But
That's because Terry is really good.
well, but you handle that. You know what I mean? So,
She does, but she's also been challenged by our own board leadership in public meetings without any responsibility for board members to contact her office directly, because we've all been sitting here when it happened. So this is very vague. Issues. I can list 100 issues easily that she's not going to know about. And so
if the high school does not have toilet paper in the girls' bathroom, to me, that's not, I don't want to hear about that.
Right.
I don't care what the parents, and if it
I'm
isn't
not arguing
Charmin.
with you. I don't want to hear about it either.
You know what I mean?
I do.
All I'm saying is
Unless it happens
leadership,
3 times, then I won't know.
yeah,
Okay, let me-
leadership has to use some common sense.
Okay, I'm talking about here, it says effective relationship with the governing board.
Okay,
We are the board.
yeah.
Do you think it is in our district's best interest to lob a question out of left field in a public meeting to our superintendent that you've never picked up the phone or asked in private in any way, shape, or form?
No, I mean.
Okay, that's what I'm talking about. That's what this leaves issues open to. Mrs. Cox has presented many things in our board meeting that have been caught off guard. I don't think it's fair to the next superintendent and the next board. Clearly, our superintendent cannot keep every issue informed. There has to be a level of responsibility from each member of the board.
But you know, every time that that's come up, I've noticed that Diana said, look, I will find that answer for you, and I'm sure that she gets back with the party who's raised the question. And as a board member, and
You're right.
I
You're
think I've been
absolutely
there,
right.
and-
She does.
And I've listened to that, and I said that's satisfactory.
Right.
It's no different than if I'm out in the community.
I think it's unfair.
As a board member.
For our
if someone-
employee.
if someone comes up to me and says, hey Pat, do you know anything about this? And I'll be real honest, no I don't, but I'll get back with you. And then, which I do.
God, we're on the same page.
Okay.
We
then why are
operate the same way.
Why are we
But I'm-
hung up on it?
I'm hung up on it because it's happened with frequency, and I'm not talking about you. It's happened
How many
with,
number would you call frequency? How many incidents?
well,
I don't think we need to
it doesn't
get-
really matter.
We're not going to get into
My
that.
point is that I think that as a board member,
Okay.
I think it's important that we have a bit of responsibility in this effective relationship that we're judging whoever the superintendent is.
Okay, then what would be the effective word in there?
Significant would satisfy me.
Significant, important.
Important,
Significant,
urgent.
urgent issues, needs an operation of the district.
Would important be better? Gives you a little more latitude?
Sure.
Is that good
Well,
with you?
We'll solve
Because
it.
I think it goes, we're talking about those things that come up that you need to be informed of because other people are.
Right.
But also, I think it also means that as a responsibility of the superintendent and bring items to the board, if we have needs, if we have operational issues, those kinds of things, those would be things that we would put on the board agendas or provide information on. And so this may be maybe 2 actual interpretations on this as the things that you need to know because they're out there and they're going to percolate and you're going to get questions, also with the idea that I'm not keeping any secrets about what our needs are or what's
Right.
happening with operations and so forth.
And I'll give you why I'm looking at this differently as well. I'll use the example of interagency. I'm not sure that that board knew what was going on internally in the operation, that things were kept from them by their executive director. Here we have our superintendent, which is our de facto executive director. I think that we should be looking at the communication aspect back to ourselves as a bullet point on this.
Okay, so is important with that, you have urgent or whatever, but it seems to me that important, and we have significant, urgent, and important, but it seems to me like important would cover all of those others.
I won't disagree with that.
All right, let's put that in. If everyone's agreeable to that, are you? Got it.
Thanks, Pat.
Okay, anything else under 4? All right. We're done with 4? 5?
combining with 7?
We're combining, but we still want to go through each one of these.
Sure.
This is one of the areas was the financial reports were, that I interpreted as doing presentations to the board versus the monthly reports that are there on the agenda.
It's both of those. So anything in 5? How about 6?
We're combining 7 together and go over 7.
Well, let's look at 6 and then we'll go to 7.
Oh,
Just for the form we're just looking at.
okay.
Anything on 6? Nicole?
Well, yeah, but I don't know how to say it or word it, or
Point it
I would
out.
like something that is not the spoon-fed industrial complex. I mean, there are alternatives out there, and I would like a way to ensure that there is a balance of education taking place in our district. And I know that, I don't know of anybody who takes that path, and I don't know if this is the place to put it. Does that make sense? You know what I'm trying to say.
But I think it's even reading. I mean, it's not always going to something. There's,
The
Reading, okay. Maybe that could be,
I don't know how to say it, but there's other ways to be in
impart
I was just
different
looking to see if there's
information.
something in one of the other ones that might be
Okay.
nice.
Well, wouldn't that be covered by B? It says, work with the governing board in ensuring appropriate professional development for the board and its administrative team. So the thing is, it would seem to me that if, these other, like, maybe not the standard thing, that she would make us aware of all those type of issues under B.
Appropriate.
Maybe somehow we could reference suggestions from the community. Maybe that could be a way to write something different. Like if we're interacting with our community and our community is like, hey, there's all these great educational leadership opportunities at Cato Institute or the Bill of Rights Center or Libertad, wherever, but we've never attended any. Maybe that is the way that the public can participate by giving it to the superintendent, and then the superintendent, can share it with the board or whatever. But I don't know if it's the right place.
Isn't that adequately covered and all that?
It's not adequately covered because it's never happening. It's
Well,
not happening.
maybe people haven't brought it up.
Well, we haven't had money for things like that for a long, long time.
And then people
Right.
have to want to go and stuff like that.
Sure. Well, we pay for a lot of people to go to a lot of things.
Yeah.
So,
Not like we used to do.
anyways,
I don't
we
see
can
a
put that on
problem with
hold till we
6.
get through the rest. I don't want to hang everybody
Yeah.
up. But I would like a little balance.
Let's move to 7.
Okay.
Anything in those three?
I think A could probably, 5A could probably be combined with something else. I mean, 5 is really, I mean, yes, overseeing the financial reports. I would even be more specific in terms of overseeing the annual budget and CAFR report. Right? You know what I mean? Because the finance director is continuing to keep you in the loop as he's putting those items together. But I think you're getting into kind of
Which one are you on?
5. I'm on 5. 5A. Oversees business operations, insisting on competent and efficient performance. Okay, well, I think that's the finance director's job to insist on competent and efficient performance. I mean, you're overseeing the finance director, but those people are working under him. It's not your job to make sure of that. I mean, a lot of this is overseen. That's why I think we could combine it a little bit if we were just a little more specific instead of financial reports. If we just reference that she's overseeing the budget. I mean, you can pull out the important words out of these top 4 and put them in one sentence. Annual budget.
I mean, what are the things that we're required by the state to do?
Exactly.
So,
I mean, and maybe that's the way it's worded. Oversees all the financial operations as required by law. Something to that effect would shorten that. And if we were going to combine 5 and 7, it would make more sense to me.
But the other side of the matrix is you're listing specific things that you're tasking the individual with. So the double-edged sword of the performance matrix is you're not just evaluating the person on their performance, you're telling them, these are our expectations.
Right.
And as you task that person, you may understand it well after time on the board. But I can tell you, after talking with at least one of the 2 automatics coming through, I would really like to see this stay broken out, because when we start talking about next year's evaluation, I think having stuff a little bit more spelled out in certain areas and laying out kind of a thought process as opposed to combining, I think is a better option. If we are to combine, I would like to see everything in that one sentence listed out, because I think it's important to say we want efficient performance out of our operations. We want to know that you're working diligently on our proposed budget. We want to know that the expenditures are kept within the legal limits. And as a board member, maybe without as much breadth as what I could have coming into a situation, I can look at that and say, wait a minute, there's a legal limit on our expenditures. It's also clues to the person doing the evaluation as to what the expectations are as well. When you combine that, what you wind up doing is you wind up saying to the board member, well, as long as we're operating within the law, and we're not really spelling out what the law is, nor will they take the time to go look at that.
I think it's very good to be pretty specific on this, because you're dealing with large amounts of money. If things are going to go awry, oftentimes this is where it's going to go. And so that as long as you're specific, which I think this is, that look, this is a major area for you, and I don't have a problem with that at all. And it's a war of pennies inside of that large amount of money. Right.
Well, if you're using it as a teaching,
I think it's an all-encompassing tool is the way I view it.
okay. So what I'm going to say is, if you're going to use it as a teaching guide, so to speak, because let me tell you, it would be nice to have some teaching guides, like if I had come onto the board and this had been more specific, but it's very vague. It's not specific, it's not helpful in the least. So oversees the business operations, insisting on competent and efficient performance. Okay, well that's subjective, and I don't know how you're going to measure that. Oversees the preparation and presentation to the board of an annual budget proposal. Okay, the budget, yes, that's important. Oversees budget expenditures and ensures that all expenditures are kept within legal limit. Well, that's both our jobs. I mean, we do that too every month as a board. So, but okay, fine, budget expenditures, all are kept within legal limits. I'm not sure exactly what that's talking about, but I'm sure Mike does, or maybe you do, but I don't know that anybody else could tell you what that means. Give me an example of an expenditure that needs to be kept within the legal limit. It's vague, I'm just saying. Oversees the provision of periodic financial reports. Well, periodic, can't we just be more specific about what financial reports we're referring to? Because that to me, that would be the CAFR, and that's what, you know, the annual report, the certified annual financial report, the audit report.
Well, I look at it as much more than the CAFR. I look at the financial reporting we get now and the way that's expanded.
The visions report?
Those are the voucher report, the auxiliary funds report.
Right. But all those come to the board.
Reports as well.
But all those come to the board in the packet every month.
You're right, but the function of that report and the oversight to that reporting is both entities. It's both the superintendent and the board.
I think that at some point people have got to recognize you got to start cutting some stuff from everybody's duties, and I just don't see it that way. I don't see that is the function, because that's an ongoing thing. That's not an annual budget, that's not an annual financial report. That's, now we're talking about the minutia. And of course she reviews it, it's in her board packet. It will be in the next person's board packet. But so if there's an overage, now we're going to ding the superintendent on their performance because there was an overage in our board packet that we missed ourselves.
Because the employee under their direct supervision wasn't paying attention to what was going on with the financials.
Are you sure that was it? Or are you sure it wasn't that we didn't lose a grant? All I'm saying is that talk about weeds, that is getting into the weeds, and it's really hard. I don't know how you're going to measure that, to be honest.
I understand.
Purchasing of supplies and equipment through systematic review. It just seems like that.
We have a policy on that, so.
Yeah.
If we have a policy on it, we can take it out. But the things we have policy on, we shouldn't be having in there.
And that's my thoughts.
Okay.
So we are taking out E.
He is going the way of the dinosaur.
Thank you.
Soon to be crude oil. Soon to be burned in a gas tank.
What do you think about having something like overseeing the business operations and then breaking it out without all this I mean, there's so much redundant.
Oversees business operations.
And then include, and then annual budget proposal, budget expenditures.
I don't have a problem
Okay.
rolling it up. I don't.
Okay.
I just think that we have to have some type of, I use the word instruction or bulletization, or in this case, the roll-up, to where we're identifying certain areas where we're going to be a little bit more observant.
I agree. I just want to call it by the name that it is.
Sure.
Instead of.
So you want to push A through D into a single? Oversees business operations, including preparation and presentation to the board of annual budget, oversees execution of the budget, ensures all expenditures are kept within legal limits, or better yet, budgetary limits.
And actually, on the periodic financial reports, that should go up with annual budget, periodic financial reports.
Right, but kind of condensing that whole thing into a sentence.
Yeah.
And I don't think I want to say legal limits, I want to say budgetary limits. I kind of like that thought
I'm
process.
just trying to dig out all the fluff for it, so it's fine
Is
to
there a reason to
oversee,
put that
but
in
let's
there?
like list out annual budget
budgetary. So for
proposal.
example, there's certain
And then
things
she
that
just said she
within
wants
a certain
periodic
period, you have to
financial
get 3
reports up
quotes if
there.
it's
Right.
within this
And then
amount, or if it's
oversee budget expenditures.
3 verbal quotes versus 3 written quotes. There's like sections on that.
Okay.
We're probably want to use legal and budgetary because some of the quote
That's fine.
issues we get into.
And we're going to get rid of E because we've got a policy on it.
You're on autopilot.
He is,
Well, no, I'm fine on this.
Okay. Do you have that, Terry? Kinda?
Yes, we will do a draft so where you can all
So-
review it and make sure I got everything, yeah.
That's kind of the big one. We
Yeah.
should stick to.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
And you
so.
got
We
legal
combine 7
and
and
budgetary limits.
Well, that was
Yes.
Okay,
the
Yeah.
And
suggestion.
E is gone.
okay. Anything else, Nicole? Do we have a consensus on that?
Only if you stop using that word.
Do we have an agreement on that?
Yes. I am
Thank
in
you.
agreement.
Time to get out the thesaurus. That poor dinosaur. All right, so we were going into 7 before we got to that.
I think that's covered in, I thought that was covered under strategic planning, but maybe that is where it is. Well, I was thinking of this vision, strategic focus.
Should we combine A and B on that one?
What's that?
Should we combine A and B on that one? Long-range planning for school facilities and total operation of all district facilities, is that something we should combine?
I'm sorry, you're looking at A and B, you said?
A and B under 7.
I think they're so different.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So anything on 7? On 8, personal and professional qualities.
This is personal.
Yes, ma'am. I keep wanting to look at G and wanted to change that to some wording involving dress code. Just because.
Just because.
Just because I'm having fun with that.
Oh, you are. Oh, good for you.
I did see someone from Utah agree with us.
I saw that. You didn't take the email from the gal from today.com.
What was that one about?
Huh?
What was that?
About the dress code.
I didn't see.
She emailed me wanting to know why we were picking on the girls, and I told her it was a unisex policy. I never heard of that.
Good. Good answer.
So J
Mhm.
jumps out at me and demonstrates loyalty to the organization and to the profession. What exactly does that mean?
I can understand the organization.
Well, what would that mean? What's the context of loyalty?
So
or
I would-
definition.
I mean, I would interpret that as I'm not going out and saying, you know, even though I work for the district, you should take your kids to Telesis. You know, that kind of thing. I don't know. I mean, that's how I consider it.
So is that L? Does L cover?
Positive emissary. No.
I think they're separate.
Because I'll tell you the way I interpret that, just based on my own personal experience and not with our superintendent sitting here, but you can be loyal at the expense of the community. If you're unwilling to answer very legitimate questions coming from the community, hence these 100 questions, your loyalty is not in the right place. And so that's my concern with the word loyalty. And I don't know how it's being used, because it's been my experience that people were loyal to the district for sure, but it was not in the district's best interest to circle those wagons.
And I read that and I look at it more as, again, is she out denigrating the district in public? I look at that as doing what's best for the district may not always be something that the district wants.
Right.
But to go out and say, the district is horrible, it's awful, don't send your kids there, goodness, here's how you homeschool. And
Well, I do think that's covered on L. I think we're talking about two different things. If you're demonstrating loyalty to the organization and to the profession, only because I experienced this very thing, that could mean we will not answer your questions, we will force you to run to the board, and we will force you to spend 5 years digging it out. I mean, that's what it could mean. And I don't like the way I've experienced it. I certainly wouldn't want anybody in the future to experience that. So maybe if we wanted to be more specific about what loyalty means. Loyalty to the truth, loyalty to the law would be okay with me. But to the organization and the profession,
And, you know, there's a statement in here, and I don't necessarily think that it's exactly what you mean, but when you're talking about your personal qualities, being loyal and having integrity and character are different. And so I can be loyal to the district, but understand having integrity and character that if you ask me a question, I'm going to give you the truthful answer. So maybe that there's another thing that needs to be added in there that addresses that piece.
sure. Because again,
So-
my concern is not current, it's future.
with integrity to character demonstrates loyalty to the organization and the profession.
I don't mind that qualifier. One time.
With integrity to character demonstrates loyalty to the organization and to the profession.
Do we need to get rid of B then?
No. That's a really good definition of the basics of character. But I wouldn't get rid of it.
Do we still need integrity there?
Yes.
J is really more in the context of loyalty. Is it blind loyalty or is it?
Do you sacrifice?
Self-serving loyalty, there's all kinds of
Yeah,
different loyalty.
but do you sacrifice, I think there is do you sacrifice left or right based, between the profession and the organization? So the organization says do X, and where's your loyalty lie? So I think the modifier kind of clarifies that you need to have integrity in your process. Anything else on 8?
Would you mind if we went back to 6 for a minute?
Doing what?
6 is the professional development.
Yes.
I have a suggestion for A would be participates in professional development, including reading, conferences, conventions, or seminars as are necessary to keep abreast of current educational development. So that encompasses and has an or. And then I would suggest another bullet based a little bit, I think, on what I heard Mrs. Cohen say is considers community perspectives and pursues information to understand all viewpoints.
I like that. Thank you.
Did that work?
Sounds good.
So, we're good with 8?
I think F is really subjective. What does that mean? Don't have a heart attack?
No, but what will happen is that we will someday have a superintendent whose health is not good, and it has to be dealt with, and it's something that he needs to let the board know, and the board needs to deal with it, and because it's here, it will come up easily.
So what does that mean? Like, I don't know what that means.
I was gonna, so there's legal protections, it's
Yeah.
in policy, so this,
I mean, we've all had health issues. Would that be a reason to ding us because we had a health issue?
Just in case you fall.
It just doesn't, it seems like an overreach. We don't evaluate our teachers that way, do we?
and we can't, we no longer
Okay.
evaluate anyone.
I think we should get rid of that.
We need to strike
Although
that.
on number F,
There's a legal issue.
you're interpreting that as health functions well under pressure. I'm thinking, because I have worked for a boss who closed his door, wouldn't answer the phone when things were tight, and all the subordinates had to handle the issues that were coming up.
Possesses
Are we
and
looking at a
maintains the
different
health
one?
and energy
Yeah.
necessary to meet the responsibilities for the position.
I must be looking at the wrong one.
You are.
Oh, that sounds like a good
Which one are you on?
Possesses and maintains the health and energy needed to meet the responsibilities of the position.
What page is that? Oh, I see, number 8. I apologize. I thought we already did
Yeah,
that.
we
You're sounding like a
we
goodie.
should kill that.
Sorry. Never mind, I feel like Gilda Radner. Never mind then.
Rosanna, Dana.
Yep.
Now
So
I'm
we're
dating
good taking
myself.
out F? Okay. Anything else on 8?
So we're on that.
Going once, going twice. Number 9. Last one.
I know that's so weird.
Forceful, articulate presentation. What does that mean? See, that's what I've been doing. I've been trying to be forceful because it says it right here,
Let's keep
Pat.
it
It's a
in there.
good thing.
Keep it in there then.
All right. I don't have a problem.
I know.
Some of the back.
Is there any that you?
We're keeping forceful.
See the one over there?
Yeah, but I like them all.
I think if we're good with 9, that we should keep the summary. I'm not sure I'm a fan of the numbering on the summary though. I think that we should be able to articulate strengths and weaknesses without a number attached to it.
I agree. And I think that, and I don't think that there should have to be a consensus either.
No, it should all be listed.
So you would do this in like just a paragraph type of thing?
Write out what you think. If you don't contribute anything, you don't contribute anything. If you contribute 20 bullet points, you contribute 20 bullet points.
Yeah.
Or if you want to write a paragraph of how the superintendent cuts you off on the way to Smith's.
In a realistic way, when you do an evaluation, if you've got, these are, you list, these are your strong points, you could go on forever, but we're looking at strong points. Mm-hmm. And then you list, and these are the things that I think need correction. And it's real specific. Mm-hmm.
The reason why
I like that better.
The reasoning, Pat, behind me not wanting numbers on it is the numbers imply that you're going to find 3 absolute strengths and 3 absolute weaknesses, no fewer, no less.
Well, there may be more, but I'm going to focus on what I think are the strongest, and then those areas of correction.
Right.
I just don't want any confusion, particularly in areas that we're real concerned about, because I think a lot of times what happens with leaders is we're not real specific with them. And as a result, they sort of are in never land, and when you put it down and say, look, these are, when you get ready to say someone's leaving, I was always very specific with them. This is what I need corrected. And then when it was over with, I said, and if those are corrected, you'll continue to be here. I didn't soft sell it. And I think anytime you're giving someone an evaluation, that's the way it should be.
So would you be okay with list up to 3 as opposed to definitely list 3?
No, I mean, if the person has one deficiency, I'm not going to create things.
Well, but what I'm saying is it kind of puts the onus here that you have to list 3.
For the weakness, it becomes a problem if you have a strong leader and you really only you're forced to pick 3.
Then don't put down 3 if you have a strong leader. If they meet all those qualities.
Well, John is saying
make it a maximum
up to 3.
Yeah.
Make it a maximum.
You're not forced to do it.
Okay.
We don't want 20. We want a maximum of 3 and we're done.
Yeah. I don't have a problem with that.
Nicole?
Well, I think that the weaknesses and the strengths are going to be borne out in the evaluation itself.
Right.
So I really think that the summary should actually be a summary, and it should be up to the individual person to write whatever they want, because the superintendent, whoever they are, is going to get a copy. Right? Did you get a copy of all of our evaluations?
No.
She shouldn't. Hold on, because we as a board as a whole do the evaluation. And the individual evaluations, the individual thought processes that go into it are just that. They're part of the whole, and we agree as a board as to what that evaluation is.
Right.
Now, when we get to the summaries or paragraph or what we think strengths and weaknesses are, or however we format this last piece of this, I think those individual pieces should be presented as part of the final evaluation.
From the individual board members? Or do
it should all be listed as a part of the individual.
Yeah, I would think that it would be a sort of, I know that it would be a summary of what the board, in having dialogue with one another, say, these are the issues. I mean, we are a board. We're trying to come up with that. And so those weaknesses should be agreeable to all the board.
Like a consensus.
Well, I hated to use that word because...
That's good, because I hate that word. And here's the thing, I've never had a job where my employer did not give me feedback. And to know that Diana did not get the very lengthy,
You provided it too.
okay. But that should be part of the process. You should not have to come to a consensus for an individual board member to provide feedback to the superintendent. They don't have to like it, they may love it, but they should have the option to have it. The idea that you have to come to an agreement with a bunch of people who don't agree on your own personal interpretation of what the superintendent, I think it's a disservice to the superintendent.
Now, are you talking about the summary, or are you talking about?
I'm talking about the summary.
Okay.
You're writing your individual summaries.
And I would agree with that. You do need to let them know, if you have strong personal opinions, you should be letting them know that there was disagreement, and there are things that people are bringing up that we don't all necessarily agree with.
Well, there should be some kind of directions in italics where new board members understand that this will be shared, this part will be shared with the superintendent. Because the way we did it last year, we combined it.
We didn't combine the
Well,
summary.
I thought we came to a consensus.
We came to a consensus on all the numbered points.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
But the summary, the points of strength and weakness, if you will, that end part should have all been shared.
But isn't
Did
the,
she get it?
Sorry.
Personnel does not get a copy of it either, so,
Did-
of this actual document that you're working on.
Okay.
So Diana,
They
did you
just
get
know
your
that it was done.
evaluation?
No.
Did you get an evaluation with?
I never got a final one to sign, so.
Yeah, you had to have, because there's a signature and I couldn't have
Really?
finalized it.
I signed it?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, I guess I did get my evaluation.
But at that time, we were doing numbers, so you guys just told me what the
The
three
number
that
was.
were on
Okay,
there.
all right,
yes.
Not the
Okay.
summaries like you were
So,
talking about.
and Pat, I understand what you're saying. I mean, when I do evaluations as an
emailed it to you.
employer, I'm going down and I'm giving the summary of my strengths and weaknesses
Right.
on the employee. But when you've got 4 or 5 diverse people on a board, I think that we all interface a little bit differently, and that summary, that strength and weakness summary should be shared on an evaluation, or even off an evaluation type process with the person being evaluated by the group. I just don't think that simply coming to a consensus, coming to an arbitrary, this is what our 3 top ones are, I think that does a disservice to the individual, because there may be information learned and gleaned from somebody's summary.
So we could put summary from each board member shared with superintendent?
If they
Let
choose,
me
they
ask
may
you.
not want to, and that's fine.
Right.
who hires the superintendent?
The board does.
The board. Board hires it as a group, not as individuals.
I don't disagree with that, and the meat and potatoes of this document are done by the board.
Yeah. So why wouldn't you come up to an agreement at the end that as the board, we feel that these are...
We absolutely can, but I think it's important to share the background on that summary as well.
Okay.
Well, let me ask Diana, I'm not trying to put you on the hot seat, because I know if I was the superintendent, I would be interested in what each individual board member thought, independent of the number. Do you think that would be helpful for a future superintendent to have that small?
I actually, if a board member wanted to share that information, I would like it. I think that, and again, it's going to depend on the board, but when we actually sat and had the conversation, almost everybody told me what their areas were of concern. And so I got that from the conversation as we went through the evaluation when you asked about my self-evaluation. But as far as seeing it in writing and also it's a little bit of pressure going through an evaluation, so remembering everything, all of the feedback is a little bit difficult. So I don't know if that answered your question, but I would be interested to know if individual board members had suggestions for
It does. It helps. I've kept every evaluation from the time I started working years ago. And that was my report card. So it meant something to me, all the feedback that I got over the years from my different bosses. So I can't imagine why somebody wouldn't want that, but...
It is a little different, though, in the fact that I don't take direction from any individual board
Right.
member. And so, so as a group,
But
I get, and the vote is the vote as well. I mean, that indicates,
Right.
I know of people who have been hired with 3-2 votes, and you have a pretty good idea then, you know, that sort of thing. But
Right.
I don't have a lot of experience in this arena, so.
Well, I definitely don't think it would be appropriate for a future superintendent to feel compelled to take direction from, that wouldn't be the intent of sharing what individually, because what if you can't come up, let's just say in a new board, you've got a 5-member board and 3 of the members didn't like the sitting superintendent and 2 of the members had something that they wanted to say, this is a very, you know, this is your strongest area of performance, and the 3 that didn't like her said, no, that makes her, we don't want to share that. So because there's not consensus, you can now not put that in their official document that they keep for themselves? Or vice versa, I mean, you can use any scenario, that was just the first one that came to mind.
I just think, you know, beyond board functionality, I think that there's a valuable part to that for the individual to know where they stand within the group that they report to.
Right.
And I would hope, though, also, you know, depending on who, like I work with the president and vice president a lot more than I work with other members. And so they're more likely to see things or perceive things differently. So it would be important if, so talking about, for example, in the way that we communicate. I mean, I would say, I'm going to pick on you, Pat. I don't call Pat. I just am not a person who picks up the phone. I send him emails, and then Terry says, oh yeah, I'm better call Pat, and then she ends up doing that. I so appreciate that, but I think Pat could say legitimately, Diana, you never called me. And I would appreciate every once in a while, since I've asked you to do so, to call me. That would be really good feedback to remind me that, oh yeah, I just, you know. So.
You know, the thing is, though, that doesn't bother me. You're busy. And if I wanted to get a hold of you, I know how to use the
Yes,
telephone.
you did, absolutely.
And so I'm not one of those people who feel insecure or left out or not invited, because I felt that way, because your secretary, you know, if necessary, will get a hold of me. But see, that's the way I am.
Right.
I'm not insecure about, or I don't have a sense of self-importance. You're busy enough. And that's why when I say that the board employs a person, I would hate to have 5 people that I have to herd like cats. And it just, there's a certain area of being comfortable when you know that you have a relationship with people, and that if they need to get a hold of you, they'll call you and they'll be honest with you. And that's why when I say the board can sit down, I don't want the board, if 3 people on the board think the superintendent is doing a good job, to me, that's what our whole idea of a democratic experience is. If that isn't the case, then those 2 other people or 1 other people, they can argue their point of view in front of a person. But if I disagree with someone, I don't go out into the public and say, well, you know, Nicole and I just don't get along. No one's ever going to hear that from me, because I don't feel that way.
Thanks, Pat.
You know what I mean? I don't. So that's why I just think it should be, I can get that.
No.
You were talking, so.
But that's why I say that it should be sort of an agreement by the board that they feel comfortable to give the person that correct. But don't ever feel that I feel left out.
No, I was using it as an example. If I really was worried about it, I would. But I do
You
think
wouldn't have brought it up.
No, you would have asked me, I know that.
But there were two, I mean, there will be people who are not that secure.
That's right.
And so, I think over time, that knowing, I do think that is a role, because even though you work together as a board, there is a lot of individual communication that has to occur.
Right.
And so knowing that if the superintendent's not meeting the needs in that process, which is the expectation, then that would be important to know for an individual, or if they are.
So what do you think? Are we going to add anything else, or are we done?
It's only 6 o'clock.
The night is young.
So, can I clarify, so are we going to leave the summary the way it was with a maximum of 3? Or are you going to have individual summaries?
I think what we want to do is move summary to its own sheet and indicate that it's a maximum of 3. And then that way we can take that and if the individual so chooses, have that forwarded as part of the review. And perhaps spell that out on that single sheet that it's not a required thing to forward it, but that's an option.
And so now this draft would come back to a regular board meeting as a draft, is that correct?
Because it's not a policy, it's just a working tool.
Okay.
So even as an action item as a draft, they wouldn't look at it? You have a special work session again?
Do we even have to have a vote to approve it, or can we?
No, it's just a working tool.
It's our tool.
So I can send it back out if Jonathan thinks we need to have another work session.
Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to get it compiled. We're going to send it back out. We do not have to have a vote on this. If there are revisions, changes, corrections, send them to me, and I will work with Terry to work that out. If we get enough of them, we'll have another quick work session to get through it.
Okay.
May I ask one question? At the beginning of this, the evaluation tool, it says the board president should tell you the scores. Since there's not numbers, how would that?
We will score our individual sheets, I believe, would be the procedure, and then we will sit down and discuss it
As a board.
in an executive session.
Okay, so that comes out. Thank you. Thank you.
Agenda here somewhere. Okay. Moving to item 4. Item 4 is an executive session. And this is where we do announcement, right?
Yes.
Okay. This executive session is being held in compliance with Arizona Revised Statutes 38, 43103, and is limited to those items described on the agenda for this executive session and consistent with the provisions of Arizona Revised Statutes 38, 43103A, sub-items 1 through 7. Consistent with the statutes, I hereby notify all persons present that the items discussed in executive session are confidential. The statute specifically provides minutes of or discussion made at executive session will be kept confidential except for members of the public body which met in executive session, from officers, appointees, or employees who are subject of discussion or consideration pursuant to subsection A, paragraph 1. This announcement is consistent with provisions of ARS 38-43103B, which requires this public body shall instruct persons who are present at the executive session regarding the confidentiality requirements of this article. Okay, we are back in regular session. I will entertain a motion based on the results of the executive session.
How would we word that?
you want me to read the recommendation?
Yes, please.
It is recommended that the board approve the revision of the 2018 through 20 superintendent's contract to reflect the 4% increase for administrative salaries that was approved by the governing board on July 19, 2018. In accordance with the current salary structure, all adjustments must be approved by the board as they signify a new contract. The change was made to allow for the superintendent to receive raises commensurate with other staff members during the time of contract.
So moved. Second.
Discussion? Hearing none, I will call the question.
Kathy Cox?
Yes.
Nicole Cohen?
Yes.
Pat Rooney?
Yes.
John Maston?
Yes. Any announcements? Hearing none, I will move to number 7, which is adjournment, entertain a motion.
I make a motion, we adjourn.
Second?
Pat Rooney?
Yes.
Nicole Cohen?
No.
Kathy Cox?
Yes.
John Maston?
Yes.
Thank you.
You know, my brain
Somebody
almost-
20 years from now is going to be reading the minutes and be like, what was wrong with her?
Oh, I-
Just